as a layman, when the USAID is exposed in the fashion that it has been, and all of a sudden we have this transparency that we've never had in my lifetime.
None of this stuff was hidden at all.
Why are those people so filthy rich? You don't seem to like rich people, so maybe explain why.
I can answer that question.
What does DC
You want me to
make,
answer it?
Sam?
As you all know, Republicans lately have been getting chewed out by their constituents at town halls, in part because of what Elon Musk is illegally doing with Doge, but also because these Republicans aren't doing anything to stop him. And it's gotten so bad that party leaders have told Republicans to just stop doing town halls altogether because they don't anticipate that things are going to get any better anytime soon for them. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is calling the people confronting their elected representatives paid troublemakers because, of course he is. You know, there's no way that they're actually just mad because an unelected oligarch is destroying their government from within, so they must be getting paid from someone, either Democrats or George Soros or both. But whether these Republicans like it or not, anger towards Elon Musk and Doge is only going to continue to grow because more Americans are becoming aware of the fact that Doge isn't conducting an audit to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. It is specifically acting to cripple government agencies that pose a regulatory threat to Elon Musk's companies, and it's also trying to cut money Congress already appropriated to finance tax cuts for rich people like Elon Musk. And a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times detailed how some of the first agencies that Doge targeted were the ones that were regulating Musk's companies or investigating his companies for violations. So this isn't being done to our benefit. It's being done to the benefit of rich people like Elon Musk and to our detriment. People are aware of this, and they're rightfully pissed off about it, which is why right-wing propagandists are now working overtime to try to obfuscate what's happening. And Piers Morgan brought on Sam Seder to debate the efficacy of Doge with two leading experts. One of them is Jillian Michaels, star of Jillian Michaels' Fitness Ultimatum 2009, 2010, and 2011 for the Nintendo Wii and Nintendo DS. And the other is Russian-funded right-wing influencer and closeted homosexual Benny Johnson, who learned the hard way what targeted ads were. And as you're going to see, it doesn't go very well for them when they try to fact check, and I say fact very charitably here, Sam Seder. But first, Sam is going to explain why he doesn't believe that Doge is actually about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse or government efficiency at all.
Audits are done regularly of agencies by inspector generals. The first thing they did was to fire all those inspector generals and not replace them. A. B, audits that lead to firings within a couple of days are obviously not being done. The notion that this is about efficiency when you're laying off thousands of IRS agents, when it is well known that every dollar spent at the IRS returns for the government $6 or $7, you're clearly not talking about efficiency here as measured in any other way other than allowing wealthy people to get away with cheating on their taxes. I mean, I could go on, but there's absolutely no evidence that there's a single audit going on. To the extent that they've saved any money, it has been largely dismissed as clerical errors on their part, and we still have no substantiation about it.
And what Sam Seder is saying here is undeniably true. So to show you what I mean, let's look at some headlines. Doge's claim that it saved $8 billion by canceling an $8 million contract raises questions about its wall of receipts. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Doge secretly changes receipts for almost half of its supposed savings. Great job, guys. Doge claims credit for killing contracts that were already dead. Another one. Doge's only public ledger is riddled with mistakes. The figures from Elon Musk's team of outsiders represent billions in government cuts. They're also full of accounting errors, outdated data, and other miscalculations. Yeah, so to believe that this pseudo-agency is doing what it says it's doing is a joke. But Piers sidesteps what Sam said and claims that they actually have found government waste. But first and foremost, they haven't found anything. They've publicized information that was already publicly available and in many cases drastically mischaracterized the things that they didn't like. Or they outright lied about them to justify their existence and to make it seem as if what they're doing is good, to make it seem as if they're discovering all of these scandalous things that the government is funding when you could just look to see what the government is funding. Now, second of all, it's not their role to eliminate what they view as waste, because that's Congress's job. And Sam explained this to Piers.
You can have an opinion that it's squandered. I can have an opinion that it's squandered, but it's been appropriated by the Congress. And in America, we have actually both statutory, constitutional, and court cases that say the President of the United States and the executive branch cannot decide unilaterally that they're not going to appropriate money that Congress has appropriated. I mean, the line item video has been found to be unconstitutional. We have the Impoundment Control Act from 1974. We have Train v. New York City from 1974, which is a Supreme Court case which enforces that. What they're doing is fundamentally illegal. I mean, you may think that some of the spending is not worthy. I may think it's not worthy, but that's just not the way our government works.
And therein lies the problem, because even if they could competently do what they say they're doing, it wouldn't be legal, because Doge doesn't get to cancel money Congress already appropriated. That is Congress's job. And this is why so many GOP lawmakers are getting chewed out at town halls, because if you're going to allow Doge to just unilaterally dictate how money is spent, then what's the point of Congress? Why are you there? You should just resign if you're a congressman and you're not going to fight this, because they're basically taking the role that you're supposed to have. They're taking your power away from you, and you're sitting idly by and doing nothing. But I mean, it's so much worse than just that, because the New York City comptroller claims that Doge actually removed $80 million in FEMA funding that was already appropriated by Congress and put into their bank account. But Doge removed it from the city's bank account. So it's not just illegal, it is outright theft. And Sam is right to point out that Doge doesn't get to dictate how Congress spends its money, because Congress, not Doge, has the power of the purse. But this is when Piers brings out the big guns, one of the experts, Jillian Michaels, who's going to explain to Sam that even though it's not supposed to be this way, she wants it to be this way, therefore it should be this way.
Jillian, you were shaking your head there.
Because it doesn't seem that the government is working. As a layman, when the USAID is exposed in the fashion that it has been, and all of a sudden we have this transparency that we've never had in my lifetime.
None of this stuff was hidden at all. None of this stuff was hidden at all. It's just that
so you're telling me that the average American knew that we were funding friggin' operas for trans people in who knows
If the average American was interested in what USAID was supporting, they could have just gone to the website.
Do you really believe that?
Wow. For those who don't know, "come on, man" is one of the most powerful arguments that you can use in a debate. Now, I love how her indignant response indicates that out of all of them, she thinks that Sam is the one who's being naive, when she's the one who didn't know that you could already look up all of the things that the government was funding. And apparently, she didn't care that much because she never bothered to look. Now, the transgender opera that she's whining about was a $25,000 grant to a university in Columbia from the State Department that's documented online. You can see it. They weren't hiding this. Now, she clearly thinks that this isn't the best use of taxpayer funds, and she's free to believe that. But in my opinion, there are other things that the State Department is funding that's higher on my list of priorities, just personally speaking, such as genocide. In fact, I'd much prefer that my tax dollars go towards the arts than bombs that are being used in an ongoing genocide. But I mean, hey, different strokes for different folks, right? But the point that Sam is making is that Doge doesn't get to dictate how this money is being spent. They appropriated money for the State Department, and they spend that money how they best see fit. If Republicans don't like it, they go through Congress and they defund it. That's how the system works. And that should be easy in theory, since Republicans are in control of all branches of government. But nobody's pointing that out. Everybody just thinks that it's fine for Doge to illegally axe these funds that have already been appropriated. But Benny Johnson comes in with a big-brained argument and contends that what Doge is doing actually is not illegal because of his interpretation of the Constitution, that I guess is superior to literally everybody else in the country.
So I've heard the Constitution thrown around a lot here. All right, let's talk about Article 2 of the Constitution. The executive branch has a clause called the vesting clause. The vesting clause makes one single man that is elected by the whole American people The only position in the federal government that has the entire whole of the country elect him is the President of the United States, who is vested with the power to oversee the executive. And that includes congressional spending. That includes the functionaries of the government, including the commander-in-chief. There are appointed judges. There are elected at state and local levels, members of Congress, but only the president is elected by the whole American people. Now, I have a giant map in my studio. I don't know if your production team can pop me. There it is. This is what America decided in 2024 in a landslide, and with the popular vote. The whole of the American people decided to vest a single man, Donald Trump, to hunt down waste, fraud, and abuse. Because while maybe there are some type of programs that you might view as just, what I view as just is feeding the American people. What I view as just is filling the potholes, educating, healthcare, and the capacity to serve Americans. And so
you can't make this shit up. As they're literally preparing a significant cut to SNAP, Benny Johnson is pretending like we shouldn't be sending all of this money to foreign countries to feed hungry people because we could be using that money to feed hungry Americans. Really, Benny? Because we all know that you would be opposed to those programs here too, to feed Americans. So why don't you stop pretending that that's what you mean when you say America first, because you're full of shit. But apparently, everything that Trump does is justified according to Benny because he won in a landslide. In actuality, his popular vote margin was like 1.5%. And as for the map that he was so proud of that he pointed out, that doesn't prove that Trump has a mandate. First of all, turnout was 63.7%, meaning more than a third of the country didn't even vote. So that map isn't representative of the whole country like he says it is. It's representative of the population that voted. Second of all, most of the red that you're seeing is land, not people. So it's not a great visual representation of data. And I say this because when you look at the breakdown of the 2024 results by county, it doesn't look so red. But when you fill it in, of course it's going to look more red. But to better demonstrate what I'm saying, I want to show you a visualization of the 2016 electoral map by county. So if you look at it, it just looks like a massive sea of red with some blue spots here and there. It looks like the country is mostly just Republican. But when you look at the population sizes of counties, you then begin to see that the sea of red is actually more of a sea of blue with some red specks. Now, that doesn't change the fact that Trump won both the electoral vote and the popular vote in 2024. But my point is that pointing to a red map doesn't mean that Trump has a mandate. And even if he did have a mandate, which he doesn't, he still would be restrained by the Constitution like every other president. But Benny Johnson thinks that Article 2 gives the president dictatorial powers, I guess, and we're supposed to believe that that interpretation of the Constitution, that bastardized interpretation of the Constitution, is what we're all supposed to go with, because he's in a cult, and everything that Donald Trump says is by definition good. And look, I've got to point out how ironic it is that all of the America First people never have a problem with the fact that our government gives billions of dollars in aid to Israel. See, people like Benny Johnson take issue with HIV medication and food going to developing countries, or aid going to Ukraine so they can defend themselves against the Russian invasion. But the moment that Israel comes up, all of a sudden it's okay to give them our hard-earned tax dollars, and America First goes out the window. So spare me this bullshit about America First if you don't have shit to say about our money going towards a literal genocide in Gaza. But even though Sam has taken the time to explain repeatedly how Doge isn't doing what it says it's doing, Piers Morgan ignores everything that he says. It goes in one ear and out the other, I guess, and just pretends like the justification for all of these Doge cuts is to bring down the debt and the deficit, when in actuality, that's not what it's about. The cuts are intended to finance some of the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts for the rich that they want. And Sam explained this and offered an actual realistic solution to the debt crisis that they incessantly whine about. But odds are they're probably not going to take him up on that. Nonetheless, let's hear him out.
I like the level of debt your country's in.
I don't think it's as much of a problem as you do. But here we know the debt shot off like a rocket with the Bush tax cuts and then with the Trump tax cuts, and they want to extend those. And so if we want to deal with the debt, and if that's a genuine concern, we can go back to the time in this country where we had the greatest economic expansion during the 50s and the 60s, when we had a top tax marginal rate of 90% of every dollar that would be earned over $470,000. Today, it would be $3 million. And if these guys are very concerned about the debt and deficit, we have a way of raising that money. We can go back to the greatest economic time of this country. So if that's genuinely their concern, we have that power to do it. I mean, we're not spending, as a function of GDP, we're not spending significantly more per capita than we were in those years. The problem is that we don't have the revenue. There's been huge tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and presided over by two Republican administrations.
Yeah, but something tells me that these deficit hawks aren't going to take Sam up on that offer. But it's always so infuriating to me how whenever we talk about social services like healthcare and education and whatnot, there's always this conversation about how we're going to pay for that and this assumption that we can't afford to pay for that because of the deficit and the debt. But whenever it comes to foreign aid to human rights abusers like Israel or Saudi Arabia or more tax cuts for the rich, that same conversation never takes place because apparently we can always afford more tax cuts for the rich or more money, for death and destruction. But when it comes to housing and feeding people, well, how are we going to pay for that? We've got to tighten the belts. We just can't afford to be recklessly spending money on all this shit. It's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical. But I mean, regardless, it's still mind-boggling to have a conversation about how to pay for anything when we're letting billionaires and corporations get away with trillions of dollars in unpaid taxes, which is revenue that could be going towards the deficit that they claim to care about so much. They're just so full of shit, and it's infuriating. But that brings us to the climax of the conversation where Benny Johnson responds to what Sam Seder said by stupidly implying that Sam's recommendation to raise the marginal tax rate back to 90% makes him some kind of an extremist, which just goes to show you that Benny Johnson does not know what the fuck he's talking about. And throughout his smug screed, he's going to inadvertently reveal that he doesn't actually know the difference between a marginal and effective tax rate. And more importantly, he's going to try to back Sam into a corner, but he gets checkmated instead. And his response to being checkmated is priceless. Just watch his face after Sam answers the question that he poses.
I love it. This is my favorite argument I've ever heard on your show. I love it. Go to the American people. Sam, I beg of you, join the DNC, run for DNC chair. I'll do anything, okay? I want your ideas to be the ideas that Democrats bring to the midterms and to the 2028 election. More IRS agents. Raise taxes to 90% of wages. I love it, Sam.
No,
How do
not
I get
90%
you
of
in the
wages,
chair, man?
90%
How do I
for
do
every
it?
dollar.
How do I do it? Where can I donate, Sam?
Just send the money to me directly.
It's the greatest argument ever. You're right, Sam.
Taxing millionaires and billionaires actually does quite well in terms of polling. And when Americans see what wealth disparity looks like in this country today, when they actually see the wealth disparity,
we've seen
it's
wealth
quite
disparity.
popular.
It looks like a federal government that's $37 trillion in debt, spending money on total bullshit.
You don't know what wealth disparity means.
And absolute and total fraud. Hey, Sam, why don't you answer a quick question?
You can Google it and find out what it means.
Hey, Sam, why don't you answer a quick question for me? Why are the richest counties in all of America, the 5 major counties in the DMV right around Washington, D.C.? Can you explain to me, what do those counties do? Are there some mineral deposits there I don't know about? Did they strike oil? Is there some type of rich industry that's created around Washington? Maybe you can answer me that question. Why are those people so filthy rich? You don't seem to like rich people, so maybe explain why.
I can answer that question.
What does D.C.
Do you want me to
make,
answer it,
Sam?
It's lobbyists. It's lobbyists like all of the ones that have been appointed to Donald Trump's cabinet and to political positions. Rich lobbyists for all sorts of these industries that you supposedly have a problem with. I mean, that's where all the money is being made. It's not being made by federal workers. It's being made by lobbyists. And those are sent by corporations.
That was thoroughly enjoyable. And it just goes to show you why these grifters hate debating Sam Seder, because what they think is a gotcha is an easy question to Sam. And the look on his face when Sam answered the question that he thought was so difficult said it all. He just laughed because, of course, Sam called him out for his bullshit, and he knew it. He was caught right there. Couldn't respond because his big gotcha amounted to nothing. You know, he thought that he was playing Sam, but he didn't realize that the controller wasn't even plugged in. So good job, Benny. You really showed him. But I mean, this is what frustrates me about conservatives. They talk about how corporations are bad, yet they vote for politicians who say they're going to deregulate corporations. They talk about how big pharma's bad, yet they recoil if you dare to bring up nationalizing these big pharma companies. You know, they'll talk about elites and liberal billionaires like George Soros while pretending like right-wing billionaires aren't also part of the problem. They talk about the cabal, yet pretend like Trump isn't one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest friends whose name appeared on the flight logs like 8 times. They are fundamentally inconsistent because they have no core ideology aside from owning the libs and hating on minorities. The reality is that the only purpose of the right-wing movement in this country is to rationalize and justify the barbarity of capitalism. See, if we increase welfare for the poor, that's bad because socialism. But if we increase welfare to the rich and corporations, that's apparently good because they're job creators and that's the free market somehow, even though so many corporations couldn't exist without government subsidies. See, to them, they support socialism, but they support socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the rest of us. But to keep up this charade, they've got to lie to us about how Elon Musk is actually dismantling the government out of the goodness of his heart for us. Not because he's trying to line his own pockets. He's doing it for us because he loves us. His heart goes out to us, as Elon Musk might put it. And you know, while this robbery takes place in front of us, these same people have the fucking audacity to tell us that immigrants and trans people are actually the cause to all of our problems, when in reality, it's the billionaires like Elon Musk and the people like Benny Johnson and Jillian Michaels and Piers Morgan who lick their boots day after day.
Ideas. In recovery mode, my brain ideas. In recovery mode, my brain ideas.